Welcome back to Skypothesis. We are two brothers who are dedicated to keeping the magic of Skyrim alive by creating unique character builds that combine unique aesthetics, functional gameplay, and engaging roleplay. We can't wait to share with you all our latest build, the Bone Shepherd. This Necromancer will utilize some of the awesome new spells from the Necromantic Grimoire. While the Anniversary Edition adds a wealth of new content to the game, in our opinion not all of it is equal in its quality. In this build video today, we are going to use the best of the best to highlight specific spells, quests, armor, and player homes that will bring your next Skyrim playthrough to life. As always, we like to take inspiration from all across the world of fantasy entertainment to create our builds, and we are excited to dive into the backstory, roleplay, spells, shouts, and more for this incredibly cool orc necromancer. Let's get started. The Bone Shepherd grew up in the easternmost reaches of High Rock. In her youth, she was given the responsibility to watch over their stronghold's cattle and herd them over lengthy stretches of land twice a year, down to the central plains during the winter and up into their mountain stronghold during the summer. The young shepherd grew accustomed to traveling by foot and cared for her animals as if they were family. Her mother was the stronghold shaman and taught her basic healing spells and alchemical medicine to keep her and her flock safe on the road. One summer, she returned to find her home had become a graveyard. There were remnants of a great battle, with the desiccated bodies of fallen Breton soldiers all hewn in a pile at the foot of the mountain, but the orcs were all buried under proper graves within the stronghold walls. Someone had buried everyone in a row, complete with headstones of carved granite. Not knowing any other life, the shepherd kept to her routine, living alone and watching over her flock. When one of her goats fell ill, her normal healing spells were ineffective, so she began poking around her mother's old tomes and magical supplies. But there was nothing to help cure the sickness that came upon her flock. She tried every herbal remedy and spell she could think of, but nothing was working. She was getting desperate, and as one of her animals released its last breath, she grabbed an odd-looking staff from her mother's hut, pointed it at the animal, and began reading from one of the mysterious tomes. The dead animal twitched, its eyes snapped open, and it rose to its feet. It hobbled around, dazed, and began to follow her. She was shocked and kept reading. She had performed an incantation that brought a cow back from the dead. Her mother was a necromancer. Excited at the new possibilities, her brain hatched an idea. This stronghold had mines and gardens that she couldn't tend by herself, and a whole pile of Breton bodies lay gathering rot and disease at the base of the mountain. Before long, she had a small host of risen dead working in the stronghold. This proved a difficult task, but she had never been more determined to get something right in her life. Her animals had mostly perished from the disease, but at least she could keep a functional farm if she could just learn how to direct these risen dead more effectively. She began poring over her mother's old tomes, feeling closer to her than she ever had before. Things that were important to her mother, those occult spells and rituals, now grew very important to her. She was making good progress, but as the summer came to a close, she began receiving unwanted visitors. Opportunistic scavengers had made an expedition to the stronghold to loot the mines of valuable tools and materials the orcs had left behind, but instead, they fled in terror after witnessing a host of undead wandering the stronghold's grounds. Only a few weeks later, they hired a lone Ashaba to root out the necromancy. This Redguard mage rained down fire upon the shepherd's home, destroying everything. Worst of all was the destruction of her mother's hut. All the staves, spell tomes, and magical materials were lost in the fire. She was left with nothing. A few animals survived, so she drove them southeast and searched for a new place to call home. The Bone Shepherd spent many years wandering the wilds along the southern side of the Jural Mountains. She lived as a nomad and thought it best to leave her foolish attempts at magic behind her. It had caused her nothing but more grief. Until one day, she finds herself caught right in the middle of an Imperial and Stormcloak skirmish. When she escapes Helgen, she thinks to herself, "Never again will I be defenseless and unable to protect my herd." She resolves right then to follow in the footsteps of her mother and learn the magic art of necromancy. This time, she will teach her minions to fight. In Riverwood, she hears outcry and disbelief from the townsfolk concerning the return of the dragons. Creatures that have been dead for millennia are now returning to the world. Her instincts tell her that something about the situation is not as it seems, and it prompts her to investigate, all the while further studying necromancy and seeking a new home to settle down in with flocks to raise and earth to till. After discovering she is dragonborn, she has a mind-shattering discovery in Kynesgrove with the covert blade Delphine. she witnesses Alduin, the firstborn of Akatosh, raise a dragon from the grave. She stood dumbfounded as a skeletal dragon crawled up out of the earth to take on a corporeal form. Her suspicions were justified, and now she knew firsthand that dragons were being raised from the dead. Delphine suspects that the Thalmor are behind it and sends the shepherd on the most uncomfortable mission of her life, to infiltrate a high society party. Never before has she felt so out of place, but she goes through with the mission with the end goal of answers and necromantic knowledge. With this newfound knowledge, she actively pursues the main questline, seeking to learn everything she can about Alduin and his ability and reasons for raising dead dragons. She becomes fixated on his power, and knew deep in her heart that defeating the World Eater and absorbing his soul would make her the most powerful necromancer who ever lived. She could become the world's ultimate protector. Amidst her travels, she discovers Golden Hills Plantation, the ultimate stead to raise up a new flock, start a farm, and live a life similar to her old stronghold. After obtaining the plantation, she quickly turns it into an efficient farm, and enjoys the peace that comes from doing what she had for so many years in her tribe. She sees her duty to her farm and herds of animals as a sacred responsibility, a way of showing the spirits in her family that she still cares for them. The farm will allow you to earn an absurd amount of gold. Hundreds of gold each day is borderline broken, but she will put it to good use and use it to buy smithing training. This will make maxing out your smithing skills significantly easier. When the Bone Shepherd isn't spending her time at the new farm, she journeys east to Gallows Hall, a well-hidden workshop on the edge of Mara's Eye Pond. This crypt was once home to one of Manamarco's skilled apprentices. It's kitted out with everything a necromancer could ever want, including the unique Bone Forge, which allows you to craft an extra skeleton minion that doesn't count towards your total summon limit. The interior of Gallows Hall is unassuming and not filled to the brim with decorations. To us, most of the new player homes go super overboard with the decorations, but Gallows Hall feels right at home in the vanilla game. You can obtain this player home by starting the quest Dreams of the Dead by simply entering Gallows Hall at any point in your playthrough. Here she can freely practice her spells and craft minions in the Bone Forge away from prying eyes. All necromancers seem to share a stubborn indifference to the societal norms regarding the undead. For some, necromancy is pursued due to outright malice. For others, it's purely for the sake of scholarship, or for its usability as a tool. For the Bone Shepherd, it's instinct. As her powers in necromancy grow, this former shepherd of animals becomes a shepherd of the dead. In her youth, she was always more comfortable around animals than people, but this wasn't due to an altruistic love of the creatures, they were just easier to command than people. As a true neutral character, she always has just looked out for herself and for her flock. In her youth, this meant protecting her animals, and in Skyrim, it means improving her undead army. And speaking of necromancy, this subset of conjuration manifests itself in a few different ways in Skyrim. There are spells that use magicka to raise a dead body instantly, and then there are necromancers like Calixto, who go to great trouble to assemble specific body parts on an altar to raise the dead. Furthermore, some necromancers bind spirits with no flesh involved at all, such as Arundel in Ingild and Sild in Ranvig's Fast. The Anniversary Edition adds an impressive array of necromantic spells spanning all of these varieties, but for this character, we are sticking to the skeletal spells for the sake of narrative and gameplay consistency. This requires a macabre brand of manual crafting and deep knowledge of human anatomy. This brings her method more in line with that of Calixto, only much more advanced. The Bone Shepherd considers him a disgrace to necromancy. Not only does he give the study a bad name, but the murders would have been completely unnecessary if he were only more skilled. Even though the Bone Shepherd prefers the peace and quiet of practicing necromancy by herself, she does decide to join the College of Winterhold for the sake of gaining a formal understanding of conjuration. Until this point, she has been self-taught. The college is one of the few places in Tamriel where necromancy can be practiced and studied freely, under the tutelage of Finis Jester. At the conclusion of this questline, she becomes the Archmage. We roleplay this as more of an honorary position, and she leaves the task of managing the college in the hands of Tolfdir. She will stop in occasionally, but the college is never a priority for her. At her core, she remains a solitary shepherd who delights in watching over her flocks, be it her living flocks at her farm or her undead flocks that help her uncover mysteries of the occult. She avoids talking to others as much as possible and prefers the company of animals or of the dead. When forced to communicate with men or mer, she does her best but ultimately feels out of place and misunderstood. She does try to keep good relations with the local jarls, knowing that if she helps them with tasks they need, they will leave her alone and keep unwanted eyes off her projects. She should also be sure to visit all of the orc strongholds and check in with her kin, assisting them with anything they might need. If vampires ever attack her farm, she should fiercely retaliate and assist the Dawnguard in purging them from the land. Though the Dawnguard may not care for necromancers, their conflict is purely with vampires, and they are desperate for anyone to join their ranks. Relevant side quests include Blood on the Ice, Forbidden Legend, and the Creation Club quests added with the Anniversary Edition, The Rising Dead, The Unquiet Dead, and Dreams of the Dead. We opted to totally ignore the Civil War, Dark Brotherhood, and Thieves Guild questlines entirely. She is a neutral character and doesn't get involved in societal struggles unless she feels it necessary. She would much rather be left alone to pursue her interests. Alright, now it's time to discuss creating the character. For her weapons, the Bone Shepherd will carry a few variants of the wooden staff, which we notice looks just like a shepherd hook. In our playthrough, we mostly kept to a wooden staff of Fireball and a wooden staff of Paralysis, role-playing that they were the same staff, and through switching them out in your favorites bar, you were simply casting another spell with the same staff. You can add any other versions of this staff with different spells at your discretion. The wooden staff is part of the Staves Creation Club content added with the Anniversary Edition. You can obtain these staves in a few ways, but they can be easily purchased from Master Neloth and Telmithrin and then crafted using the Staff Enchanter. Until you reach this point in Solstheim, we used the Staff of Fireball that can be found leaning against a tree up the mountainside from the Thalmor Embassy. For her armor, she will be wearing a set of insulated dragonplate armor, a new armor set added with the alternate armors pack in the Anniversary Edition. The insulated variant of this armor features rugged-looking fur that befits a shamanistic necromancer much more than its vanilla variant. She will also carry a dragonplate shield and will wear the Helmet of the Old Gods for an additional 30 points of magicka. The wild feathers and horns added in this headpiece fit perfectly with her shamanistic nature and really tie the look together of an occult shepherd. For auxiliary gear, she will wear the Galder amulet and a ring of Fortify Conjuration. Moving on to spells and shouts. For vanilla spells, she will use Soul Trap for staff recharging and conjure Bone Men, Mistmen, and Wrathmen from the Soul Cairn. The two restoration spells to keep on hand are Fast Healing and Necromantic Healing. These will be used situationally to heal herself and her minions. The Necromantic Grimoire adds a great variety of spells available for purchase from Finis Jester, but again, we decided to only use the new skeletal summons for the sake of creating a more thematically consistent character. In order of acquisition, we have the nearly useless skeleton minion, the incredibly useful skeleton archer, which applies a weakening debuff against enemies they hit, the skeleton champion, and the skeleton warlock. Her signature and favored spell is Conjure Bone Colossus. This ridiculously cool spell summons a giant skeletal behemoth to your side, and allows you to summon 2 additional skeletons while he is out. We imagine this is the culmination of her efforts to craft the ultimate minion. Since you are the only entity in the game that will ever summon one of these, it's not too much of a roleplay leap to imagine it as her own creation. To her enemies, it is a terrifying amalgamation of body parts, but to her, it is a capstone piece of necromantic art. When you have the Bone Colossus summoned, the Twin Souls perk, and an extra minion from Gallows Hall, you can have a party of 5 skeletons following you into battle. It is important to note, however, that the unofficial Skyrim patch currently messes up the Bone Colossus and will not allow you to summon additional skeletons while he is out, despite that being the main draw of the spell. So just be aware that until it's updated, you will need to remove the patch to play this build completely. Now let's talk a little bit more about the Bone Forge. You can craft a 5th skeletal minion depending on the ingredients used, and it will stay with you permanently, at least until it dies in battle. As a side note, Ancano hates this minion in particular for some reason, and becomes instantly hostile when he sees it. So until you finish the college questline, it's best to refrain from bringing your basement creations to college with you. We're not sure yet if that's a repeatable bug, but the encounter was strange enough to at least mention, so you aren't surprised if it happens to you. Her 6th and final skeletal friend is the Bone Wolf pet, obtainable from a necromancer across the water from the Solitude docks. Once you complete the quest The Wolf Queen Awakened, a courier will find you and deliver a missive to root out this necromancer. The Bone Wolf does not attack, but provides you with a passive buff, granting 25% extra damage against the undead, useful for clearing out Nordic tombs, fighting rival necromancers, and rooting out vampires. Moving on to shouts, she will use Marked for Death, Unrelenting Force, and Whirlwind Sprint for positioning. Marked for Death is an incredibly useful tool in this playthrough to debuff your enemies and allow your skeletons to take them out with ease. Soul Tear is a thematically fantastic shout for the roleplay, but in practice it's not very useful for her playstyle. Summon Durnavir is a great option as well, but again she is already really strong without the extra help from a zombified dragon. Still, he's a good friend to have on hand when needed. Now let's dig into stats and perk spread. When you obtain the Master Conjuration perk, the Bone Colossus will still require a massive pool of magicka to summon him, 298 to be exact. For that reason, we will place all level ups into magicka until reaching level 30. Once you reach this point and obtain your enchanted armor and jewelry, you will have a pool of 360 magicka and a ring of Fortify Conjuration. This should be just enough to comfortably summon all your needed minions at once. After level 30, you'll want to start putting all future level ups in health. For the Standing Stone, we are using the Lord Stone for the extra tankiness and magic resistance. This build layers a lot of extra defense, which is important due to the low pool of health. We want to be tough enough to draw the aggression from off of our minions and onto our bony armor. Finally, we are playing as an orc for the roleplay, useful racial ability Berserker Rage, and instant access to all of the orc strongholds. By the time you reach level 40, you'll want the following perks. In Conjuration, take the Novice through Master perks, 1 in Summoner, Necromancy, Dark Souls, and Twin Souls. In Smithing, take the Heavy Armor side of the tree all the way up to Dragon Armor. The Light Armor side is shorter, but crafting Dwarven gear is the most effective way to power level without exploits. Also, this way she can craft a set of Orcish armor to use while leveling. Remember to use all that gold from the farm to buy smithing lessons. In Block, take all 5 in Shield Wall, Deflect Arrows, Elemental Protection, Block Runner, and Shield Charge. In Heavy Armor, take all 5 in Juggernaut. We aren't going further because we don't wear a complete set. In practice, this doesn't matter very much because we are stacking layers of defense from Block, Legendary Crafted Heavy Armor, and the Lord Stone. In Enchanting, take just 1 in Enchanter, so you can then take the Soul Squeezer perk. She is not an Enchanter, so this is done only to get extra uses out of your staff. In Destruction, take Novice Destruction so you can get both perks in Augmented Flames to buff her most commonly used staff of Fireballs. In Restoration, take the Novice and Apprentice perks, Regeneration, Respite, and 1 perk in Recovery. You will definitely want to get Necromage as well, but that requires Restoration level 70. At this point, you probably won't have this tree leveled that high, but it's certainly something to work towards if you plan to play past level 40. You can also consider adding additional perks in Destruction to make a variety of more powerful staves. Some miscellaneous perks to attain are Force Without Effort from Parthenax, Agent of Mara for extra magic resistance, Sailor's Repose for reduced restoration spell cost, and Companion's Insight to make your minions immune to friendly fire. Alright, it's time to dig into the Bone Shepherd's special moves. This is our favorite part of each build video and is an opportunity to dive into the gameplay mechanics of Skyrim with a fine-tooth comb and create ability combinations that form the basis of gameplay unique to a specific character build. The Bone Shepherd's first special move is called Juggernaut, which is a combination of Berserker Rage, Force Without Effort, the Lord Stone, and Shield Charge. Necromancers have a reputation of taking a backseat role and watching as their minions do all their dirty work for them, but the Shepherd is not a traditional Necromancer. She charges into battle like a tank and draws enemy aggression away from her minions. Use this move to get up close and personal with your foes and mow them down, leaving them sitting ducks for all the ranged attacks of your skeletal minions. Her next special move is called Necrotic Curse, performed by combining Marked for Death with the Bone Archer's arrows that weaken enemies for 60 seconds, along with Companion's Insight. Even the strongest enemies begin to melt in seconds. Companion's Insight is pretty much mandatory here, so you avoid accidentally weakening your own team. In the thick of battle, it's nearly impossible to avoid hitting your minions with your shouts. Up next is Choke Point, which is the combination of Bardic Knowledge, Whirlwind Sprint, and Shield Bash. Use this move to flank enemies by sprinting to the other side of the battlefield and sandwiching enemies between your minions and your shield. Bardic Knowledge regenerates stamina, allowing you to stunlock fleeing enemies with Shield Bash. Also, by flanking enemies, it will ensure your ranged minions do not accidentally hit you, which is a bigger risk if they are all standing behind you. Her final special move is called Assembled Legion, which is the combination of Bone Colossus, Skeleton Archer, Skeleton Champion, Skeleton Warlock, and a Bone-Forged Wrathman, and the Bone Wolf. This fully assembled team represents the Bone Shepherd in her full power. This minion lineup is versatile, and they complement each other to absolutely dominate the battlefield. Few enemies can possibly stand a chance against the might of her fully assembled army of undead. And with those special moves completed, we are ready to wrap up this build video for the Bone Shepherd. We've been wanting to take another swing at a Necromancer build for a while now, and the new content from the Anniversary Edition was the perfect opportunity. There's an impressive array of new equipment, spells, and other add-ons that would boost the effectiveness of the Necromancer archetype and even push the total minion count past 5. We believe that a good Skyrim character needs to keep a balance between aesthetics, roleplay, and gameplay, and with that in mind, we felt that 5 skeletal minions were plenty powerful. Plus, the thematic consistency was worth it in our opinion. We hope that you enjoy playing as the Bone Shepherd as much as we have, and that you stick around for more builds in the future. We have a lot more content planned, so be sure to subscribe and ring the bell so you can get notified as soon as we post a new video. Thanks for helping us keep the magic of Skyrim alive. We'll see you next time, right here on Skypothesis.